I thought I would introduce Endless RPG, kind of go through and give some of the features on how to use it to go through a random map. Play some solo D&D using it. Supports D&D 5e and Pathfinder First Edition, but I'll just be saying D&D a lot because that's where most of the people that are using it are playing. Give a little background. I've done solo D&D from the advanced Dungeons and Dragons days of the late 80s. Me and a friend used to do it without a DM, just kind of sharing the duties and really just rolling up random dungeons from the back of the DM's guide. I've kind of done it throughout, the past few decades, doing solo, doing without a DM with friends, being a DM for friends, playing in a group with another DM. And I've always found solo play or DM-less play to be, just as fun as any other type. It's different. It's a different sort of fun. But it can be just as rewarding, if not more. I think my most memorable times was playing with a friend and us just using the back of the DM's guide to roll up random dungeons and coming up with our own stories. And I view solo play as kind of like being an author, coming up with your own story. And as an author, that's one of the things that I've done as well. And you just sit around and daydream what's going on. And the fun thing about solo D&D is you daydream part of what's going on, and then you go play what actually happens with that. So with that in mind, let's go through and see what it's like to boot it up and go through like a little quick beginner adventure. The first thing you're going to want to do is create characters. So I have created a couple of characters. We'll create a couple more. Characters are very minimal. The only difference between these are the icon sets that you can use, so it's a little bit different for them. There's no other difference. You can see there's very minimal attributes that I keep track of because I don't really need it. This is not the DM for you. Some people I've seen boot this up and think it's going to be a DM. That's not what it is. It's to set up a random map. When you play solo, you're playing the DM as well, and that's one of the fun parts is you get to see that side of the table. So all you really need, the level is really just there to help if you want to automatically set the challenge rating, but you can set the challenge rating to anything you want, so level's kind of irrelevant. Hit points is just if you want to keep track of the current hit points using the app, you can do so, or you can do that off to the side. Perception bonus and initiative bonus can be important to set. You can set, just click on it and type in what you need for it. The reason these are important is if you do use any of the combat aids, it will roll initiative for everybody, including the party. But the big thing is perception, because it does do perception rolls. That's the only rules that it really does that affects the game that are needed, because you don't really want to pop up saying, hey, roll a perception, but I'm not going to tell you what you're perceiving. And something's there, and if you missed it, I missed something. As a DM, when I DM'd people, I used to ask them to roll perception rolls all the time, and then if they succeeded, oh, you spotted a butterfly. I always wanted to, if I'm asking them for a roll, they don't know if it's real or not. So with the app, I wanted to do that behind the scenes so that the map can unfold for itself. But it's the only one that's actually kind of important to actually set correctly. So once we've done that, you do require to set an icon, and then we can save this character. And characters can be something a little bit different. So you can actually set it as other, and then go down here and choose, basically say, hey, I've got a companion. I've got a wolf companion. I'm just going to go ahead and set it up as well. One thing to note on this is there is the ability to change the order, and that's important because where you're at in the party order will affect your perception rolls at times. So if you're coming across a trap in a hallway, the first two people in the order will have your basic chance of perceiving it, and further back might have penalties or might not even get a roll if you've got like 8 characters or something. They're not spotting a trap before the top people come into it. So there's some rolls with that, but other than that, then the perception rolls are the only things that are really kind of rolled for you. So there's quick missions. That's just a little flavor I threw in. To me, the main thing is doing custom maps. But if you want to just do a pop-up, a quick mission, it's the same thing as a custom map, really, but it just randomates everything. One thing that I've just recently brought in is this boss enemy group. That it just kind of allows a little bit more flexibility on how the map's created and what kind of story you're trying to tell. But these primary enemy and secondary enemy is basically what you're talking about. It's maybe about 60 to 70% of what you're going to face is going to be the primary. 20 to 30% might be the secondary enemy. There's a chance of something that's not either of those. So you're just walking into a room filled with rocks and there's a spider there, for example, even though you've chosen all orcs. And you can have primary and secondary be the same. The boss is really just in case, hey, if you've got, a wizard has charms some orcs or goblins to work for them, you can choose a boss that's different from your primary enemy. So when you go in here, first thing is location. What we're gonna do is we're gonna have a necromancer that is raised up some skeletons to scare some orcs, and they're basically being used to dig through a tomb to look for magical amulet. And that's our story that we want to do. So we're going to choose crypt. We're going to do the tomb, which is slightly smaller. You see that L there for it means it's a larger map. Some of these are smaller maps. Outposts are considered tiny. Mainly what that will do is, as well as being a bigger map or a smaller map, for the tiny maps there will be fewer encounters. So it's actually going to be a little bit easier to go through if you have a tiny one. If you've got regular sized one, it shoots for about 6 or 7 encounters, but that's not actually true. What it's doing is using the DM's guide as a guideline, but instead of having 6 standard encounters, you might have 2 smaller encounters that only count for 1 regular encounter. So you might end up with 10 or 12 different encounters, but some of them are easy hallway wandering monster encounters that don't even really count against it. You might have some easy encounters, some regular encounters, and maybe a hard encounter thrown in. Another thing to note is when we were choosing that, like when we choose our crypt and our tomb, or let's look at a dungeon. If we look at our dungeon, we do a mystic dungeon, or we can do an unholy dungeon. Part of the system, I created a new encounter system when I went from 1.0 to 2.0 that's aware of what the room is. So if we chose mystic, we're going to get more magical ritual rooms, libraries, things of that nature. And because of that, for the encounters that support it, which they'll say advanced under them, it's going to end up rolling more things that are a little bit more appropriate for a library or for a ritual room or a magical room. Unholy, you can have more altars and more rooms with holy symbols and things of that nature in it. So it's just going to throw in a little bit of flavoring, and that really affects something like mercenaries, which if you choose military, which some of them will have military as an option, it's going to have a lot more fighters. If you choose mystic, it's going to have more mages ultimately. So you can tell, it's basically to allow you to tell your story a little bit better. We're going to choose crypt and tomb. Our primary enemy was orcs that have been bullied. We'll grab those. They see that they have advanced on them. Secondary is going to be the skeletons that are scaring them. You can do undead. It's going to end up being skeletons and zombies. Undead works all the way up to CR 20 with whatever's appropriate. Obviously, once you get into higher levels, CR 12 and beyond, CR 10 and beyond, it's hard to match difficulty. It's hard to find anything that's really, there's a very limited number of creatures that are up in those levels anyway. But one thing that these advanced do roll at times, depending on what you're choosing, is it will create a fighter skeleton, for example, or a skeleton mage or something of that nature. So you can come across 12th level skeleton fighters with 2-handed swords that have been leveled up with Battlemaster, for example. At the lower levels, it's not going to do that as much. There are kobolds and things like that you might find something that has a class and it's been leveled up. It's a little bit different than what you might find in the manual. These are humanoid necromancers. We'll go ahead and, before we do that, we'll look at difficulty really quick. The main difference between that is normal tries to follow the DM's guide so that as it adds different creatures to an encounter, it increases the experience worth of that creature, so the encounters are a little bit smaller. Hard just simply doesn't do that, or doesn't do it as much. I've always felt like the DM's Guide was created a little bit easier encounters at times. And then harder just simply adds more encounters on the map. And of course, you can choose whatever challenge rating. It doesn't have to match your party, and it's another way of dealing with difficulty. We'll generate this. Hopefully you'll get it getting started when the first time you play there. Tell you kind of the basics, but it should be relatively easy to do. One of the things that I tried to change when I did the 2.0 version is this is really geared for solo players, and I try to give as much help as possible and create systems to make it kind of interesting. So it's got its own little trap system, its own door system, for example. And for encounters, there's multiple ways to kind of deal with an encounter, which we're about to see because I can see some works on the map already. So as you approach, well, this one is popping up and telling us what's in the hallway. So there's ritualistic circles in the hallway, and it's occupied by orc. That probably means it's a singular orc. So I come up, I see the orc. There's a lot of different ways to handle encounters, and we're going to deal with this one the easiest way. But first, we'll look at our orc. We could go in and just by clicking on it get some details for it. This orc is holding a halberd. Sometimes it'll just say default, so it's whatever's in the monster manual. For a lot of the humanoid creatures, they can have weapons. Like I said, they can sometimes be leveled up in a class. They can have other modifiers. You could come across a large orc or something of that nature that has some modifiers to it. And if you have anything, if you see something like that, you just go into the screen and it'll tell you what's going on. So on this one, we're going to do it the easiest way, which is just defeat encounter. If I were just come across one orc, I'd probably just start rolling, see what's going to happen. So we've defeated that encounter, and we can just keep on moving. You can move with clicks or touches, and it'll tell you what your path is. Or if you're on the PC, just use your number pad. I blew through that door a little bit too quick, so I'll try to stop on the next one. These are orc priests. This is a leveled up class, so it's going to tell you it's a level 3 cleric, generic. You can see that a lot. They just don't have a subclass. It makes them slightly easier, which is good. Otherwise, if you're constantly running across some with subclasses, it might end up being a little bit too difficult. They have dented scale mail, so it's -1 to armor class for the scale mail. They've got the light hammer and a round shield. So, and it gives you the spells. That's the main thing you're going to run into. These are randomly rolled spells with the full spell list from the manual. So these aren't like spell sets or anything. So you might see some crazy stuff. You might run across something that doesn't have that much useful spells, which is kind of realistic. They're not expecting somebody to barge in and start fighting them. It does have preferences, though, a lot of times, especially with wizards that have different specialties. If it's a necromancer, then it's going to favor certain spells, necromancy spells, over others. And they have priority spells because of that, to make sure that it kind of chooses, for example, a wizard, an evoker especially, but most wizards will try and choose some type of combat every few levels at a minimum. Come back out of here and we'll do the quick battle one. This is where the initiative is showed. You can click anything here and you can actually change the initiative. We could come in here and say 21 initiative. And so if you did need to change initiative or wanted to roll it for yourself, this one right here is just for keeping track of hit points or keeping track of whatever we do. We can click on who they're fighting. We could pop up and say, okay, we've done damage to them, or heal them back up again a little bit. We can even check their information. On the characters, you can leave a note. Blessing. So I cast a spell on themselves, and now I've got a note of it. When we go through here, we can go through the turns. And we can actually set the turn. We can come over here and say, no, let's go back to this person and set the turn from them. I can damage these guys with massive damage to kill them off. And what happens when you kill them like this, it'll keep on going. It's ready to, if you want to continue combat, maybe they summon something, you still have to kill it. Once you exit, it actually acts like you'd click the defeat button. It's kind of the same thing. It recognizes that you killed them. So now we can do our loot of what they had on them, and we can be on our merry way. So when you do the door, there's going to be a number of different options that can happen with the door. If it happens to be locked, or it can be it could just be stuck. So one of the things you can always do to a door is cast a divine spell. You can cast detect traps. This one, for the most part, it's going to ask you whether or not you're sure you want to do something. We are sure. We've cast it. Beyond just the door, it actually will cast that spell around you as well. So if there was a trap near us, we would detect that as well. We can also say we've been adventuring a while and we're kind of hurt. We don't know if we really want to go through this door. Let's just do clairvoyance to see what's beyond it. Now we can actually see what we're about to face, which appears to be more orcs, crazy enough. So we're fine with that. We're going to go through and take them out. This isn't the greatest one to do battle map, so I'm just going to say that you can also negotiate charms, cast sleep spells, do whatever you want to do. You won't always kill what we're going against. So if you did want to come up and say, hey, I'll give you 10 gold pieces just to leave, or maybe the orcs, because they're kind of being bullied into it, maybe you can just say, hey, persuade them to go ahead and leave and deal with it in a non-combat way. You can do disable encounter. When you do that, you won't be able to loot what they have on them, but they may or may not, depending on what you've just done, allow you to loot any chest in the room, and that's kind of up to you. That's part of being the DM portion. If you look at experience, we do keep track of experience, and that nurtured one does show up. You do get experience for overcoming. If you were just fleeing from something, these things don't move, so you could just just ignore it and act like you fled from it, and it won't count for your experience. Something does pop up in this. Of course, you're keeping track of experience, so you don't have to count it. This is just really there to help you out, really, at the end of the adventure, to tally everything. Let's open this one. Hopefully we'll come across one that's locked or something, and we did do it. So we've got force door. We've got destroy door as an option. Under magic, we've got blast and knock spell. That's the different ways beyond pick. So foresight door is really just kind of like slamming it and trying to open it really quickly. It's meant for a very quick amount of force against it. Blast is kind of the same way. Force will be based more on a strength check. If you blast it, it's amount of hit points within a round, so you can have multiple wizards throw fireballs at it, because that's what you want to do with locked doors. You can disintegrate it, which is usually going to work. Won't always work, but will almost always work. Destroying the door will always work unless there's some type of magical protection, and that's just taking your axes out and beating through it. Anything you do will cause noise. So if we tried to force it and we failed, we've got at the top, we've got loud noises. So we've made a loud noise. If we do knock, it is not going to succeed or fail. It should succeed unless there's some type of magical protection, because that's what knock does. But it will make a loud noise because that's what knock does. And blast will make a loud noise. Or we can just pick the lock. That's the easiest way of doing it. And it tells us what our roll is that we need to pick it. And we were successful. You will see critical fails out there, and a lot of things will say if you fail by a certain amount, it's a critical fail. It's a little bit changed from the regular rules. It's not a 1 necessarily, but there will be some traps. They'll say if you fail by 4 or more, whatever it might be, it'll say it on the screen. Then you've critically failed, and that's just so that it doesn't make sense that everybody in the party, including someone that's never had any experience, is doing something like investigating a trap, for example. Well, not everybody's going to be able to investigate a trap, and some of them might accidentally set the trap off just trying to look at it and see what it is because they don't know what they're doing. So having a critical fail be a certain point or more kind of encapsulates that type of activity. So we've picked it. We're through. This is a bigger room. We're just looking for our necromancer. We're at another one. We can also break the lock. This doesn't always pop up. Sometimes the lock is part of the door, and some of it times it's a padlock. So this should say somewhere it's a padlock. See, it's got a cracked padlock, so we can just break the lock if we want. And then move on. Now, of course, a lot of rooms will be empty depending on the map size and how many encounters it's going to do. But there's always neat stuff to do and things that you might come across. I would come across another single orc with a rapier. I would feed that and loot everything from them. Should show you the ignore. I did ignore the ignore. Now here's our first chest. Again, we do some magic on it. We can do some clairvoyance on it, see if it's got anything good in it. We can blast it, or we can just open the chest and loot it. That's usually the easiest way of dealing with chests. All right, here is 3 dretch. These are, like I said, sometimes it could pop up with something that is not what you've picked. And it'll try to put something corresponding that makes sense, and it makes sense to have some type of fiendish creatures near when you've got some undead involved in it. So we're going to battle map it. This is just a very simple battle map. I'm not trying to replace anybody's combat tools on this. This is not, the app's not meant to be a virtual tabletop or a combat manager so much as just to give you some tools to help you out a little bit. I always think of it as if I'm doing this, it's miniatures. I like miniatures or theater of the mind. But the battle map is, if you do want to use this, a little bit of aids, it might have some clunky elements to it. It will just teleport you somewhere. You don't walk to it because you could be teleporting for all I know. So it's just very basic stuff. But for the most part, a lot of these will look exactly the same as that quick battle screen. And it kind of acts the same. It just has a representation. Let's get through this and have this guy. I do try to point out with different colors to make it obvious. These are the bad guys, because based on the color, so when they're coming in here, you can kind of see that they're light red, so that means they're not a nice person. We can clear a note at any point in time as well. The blessing just wore off. It's unfortunate. And the spider's going to come in here and take this one out for us. The spider's cool. Again, just like the other one, everything's dead, but it's going to wait until you actually exit out. And it's automatically looted on this one, and we can loot, we can come in. Another thing is all of these objects that allow you to interact with them, besides doors, will also allow you to ignore them. And basically what that means is I'm just trying to walk past the chest. It happens to be in my way. It's in the middle of a hallway or something. I just want to walk past it and not deal with it. We also come back in here and do an action of unignore objects. And now we can interact with it and get our awesome loot. It will run loot tables. So you can find up anything that's in the DM's guide. You can end up finding. We got more circles, because we are dealing with a tomb. Okay, we spotted our first trap, spotted our perception trap. Check was successful, so we've spotted a camouflaged cover on the ground, likely hiding a small pit. It's given us some information, and because it's a small pit, we know it's there, it's easy to avoid. So we're not going to disarm a pit, otherwise you have to bring a lot of dirt in with you. Okay, we got another treasure. One thing to note, I got another pit. I should have done what I'm about to do first. We didn't notice it. But one action you can always do is search nearby. You're always searching, so you've already rolled once. This is a second roll, and it does make some noise. So I wouldn't always do it unless you just want to attract more attention. But if you think you've missed something for any reason, you can always try and search again. if you're low on hit points and you're getting, oh, so now we've stepped into a bear trap. Our perception check did not work. And so it has closed on Fronane and dealt 1d4 damage, but that can be avoided with a DC 10 dexterity check. Some of them will be avoided with dexterity acrobatics checks. Some of them, some traps, like maybe a spear trap and things like that, might actually have attack rolls against you. So some of the traps will be a little bit different like that. Ronan, I'm going to pretend you just got damage and your hit points is 8. So you can come in here and put notes and do some whatever you need to do as far as these are concerned. Change their perception bonus because you cast a spell or found a magic item at any point in time. For actions, we can rest. We can cast magic, which is detect traps anywhere. If we try to rest, it's going to tell us that what the short and long rests will kind of do. And short rest has a very poor chance, and long rest is almost impossible. We're sitting in the hallway, number one. It does take different things into account. It says it looks and says that's a hallway. That's not going to work out quite as well. It will also be based partially. Oh, we're getting lots of good traps here, but they're all pit traps because we're on CR1, so we're not going to get too hard of stuff. So now that I'm in here, I can try and rest. Long rest is still almost impossible. Short rest is even. But an action I can do next to a door is close the door. And if I close the door, oh, my short rest just went up a little bit because I'm not trying to rest in a room with a closed door. So remember, doors can be closed is a big thing. And short rest and short rest auto. Auto is just going to automatically try and heal you for the amount that it's supposed to heal, and that's it. So we've done it without an interruption. Yes, you can be interrupted while trying to rest. That's why it's important not to do the long rest when it says almost impossible, because you will almost certainly get interrupted. Some Darrow we've come across, and I'm going to just not deal with that, and then come up here. Disable them. This is kind of like an ignore. So this one I had ignore. Ignore that one. So I can kind of walk over these. So now if I go to action, I'll see, oh, they're overriding each other. So we've got a little bit of a bug here. Which one's going to account for? I have unignored the chest. And now if I go to action, and there won't be a bug, I can enable encounters, and that just allows me to interact with that again. So you can always feel free to ignore things, and then there will be a way to go back and interact with them. And you will find occasionally some bugs because I cannot check everything. One thing that I'll point out is you'll see like the you stand before a. I don't try to be. I don't want this to feel like a computer role-playing game or Baldur's Gate 3 or something of that nature. And if I were a DM, I'd be saying, well, okay, you stand before this or something of that nature. So that's kind of like the part of the thematic type of thing that I'm trying to do with this is I don't want people to feel like they're just playing a computer game because that's not what it's meant to do. Oh, there's a nice little library. Now, these maps are not procedurally generated. That's what the 1.0 had that. Sometimes procedurally generated maps can be a little linear. If you played Diablo 4, you know what I'm talking about. They can be pretty linear at times or have their own little quirks. You could do things with handcrafted maps you just simply can't do with procedurally generated, or it's very tough because you're also trying to look out for your player. So if I were to have an avalanche that blocks off something, I have to know that there's another way around to get back out to really the exit. That's the main thing. I have to be able to leave. So these are handcrafted, but the rooms, if you looked at what the actual map is, all the rooms are blank, and then it kind of figures out, okay, I'm going to put the library here, and I'm putting this here based on, you know, what the theme was. There's a lot of different maps. So there's, 20, 30 different dungeons, 20, 30 different caves, 20, 30 different towers. There's enough maps that you're just not going to look at and go, oh, that's, I've been on this map. I know exactly where everything is. Little things can change in the map as well, especially the goal, where the goal is. Okay, let's set another door. With a trap, we're going to try and disarm. So it tells you it's a tripwire. So we're going to, it was a tripwire connected to a strange bag. So it's giving you some hints to stuff. So if we, you can intentionally trigger it, you can fail, you can critical fail. So, oh, snaps a hidden voodoo bag. Voodoo bags are bad guys. Minor explosion dealing 1d4 fire damage and to the character attempting to disable it, and releases spores that inflict disease. A successful DC 12 Constitution check negates the disease. Diseased characters suffer a -1. Here it is, on Constitution ability checks until they perform a short rest. So that would be something you might put into notes. So we've got something a little bit more advanced. That's always good to see something. And we found our necromancer. I can tell right now because it looks like a necromancer is in the room. And it's in a room that's an altar room, apparently. So we've got everything. It's a protected necromancer with a staff. So we look at protected, what we see is magic armor, mage armor. It's just cast mage armor on itself, is basically what it's saying here. But you can actually, these are modifiers. You can find different modifiers. You could go find against wolves, then you might find an injured wolf. You might find a smaller wolf. You might find a larger wolf. And that'll have different effects. A lot of times, if it doesn't say anything when you go to click on it, it might be that lowered the hit points, or you might see something that lowered the current hit points because it was injured. So you can see a lot of different little modifications. When you get up in levels, you'll see a little bit more advanced ones that can start really altering how you might tackle something. But this one is just a level 1 wizard for the most part. It's going to try and match the level of anything that levels up to what the CR is, or in that ballpark. Might be a little bit higher, might be a little bit lower. So we get to go up against the level 1 wizard that was able to scare all these orcs. I don't think we actually saw any skeletons. Sometimes that'll happen. There might only be one group of skeletons or 2 groups of skeletons on the map. But we can take out Chill Touch, Shocking Grasp, False Life, and Thunder Wave. So it does, you can see how it tried to, it only tried to get some necromancy spells in there and got that Chill Touch in there. Those are considered priority spells. And so it is going to try and match when you're going up against wizards. All of the different schools are in it, and so it does try to match those schools in there. So if you go up against a divination wizard, you can be fairly sure that it's going to be easier because they're going to have divination spells sitting there, and they're not going to have, maybe they don't have the lightning bolt or fireball spell. So we can go through this one. We're going to go into the battle map. Go look at this bad boy. Oh, there's blood coming out of the altar. There's some symbols. It's very dainty, but guess what? You're just a wizard, so I just did 6 damage, and I just feel bad for you now. You're just about to die. And then you're going to cast something back at me and totally damage me for 3 hit points. And I feel really bad because now I've been damaged by this person's going to come over. Oh, did I pop on top of it? Now I got it. We're going to finish you off. And victory is ours. It's not going to throw a parade for you when you're victorious. It's, all right, you're done. So one thing that I should have actually noted is it did have some text on it when you look at the encounter. It said it was the goal encounter. And when you look at this chest and get to the treasure, it says it's the goal or target chest. So we wanted to find a magic game. That's what they were digging for. They'd found it, and this is where the magic game would be. So it's part of the game is you can change anything. You can do your own traps if you want. Every time you come across a trap, you can roll your own trap if you want. If you're looking for a magic amulet, the best thing is the goal or the target treasure is going to have that magic amulet. We'll loot everything. We can look at our treasure, what all we found. We can look at our experience, but we're really not done. Now, I could go in here and say main menu, delete map, and it's going to have to ask me if I'm sure, and it's going to state that this is generally not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go ahead and leave the area. And the reason for that is that you could come across something. You're not always gonna, and it might sound like a, I find out where the entrance was. Just an exercise in futility, but it's possible that something spawned somewhere on the map because you did a short rest, because you made noise. If you did a long rest especially, things might move around, and so you could come across something. So if this were some type of rescue mission, then it's just, best to go through and come back to the... Was this where I started? This was not where I started. I remember coming across this room now. Now we've come across a bear trap. It's best to go to the entrance. You can also just, you don't have to follow that one. There we go. Now we're at the entrance. Now we can just come out and say, hey, we're done. You don't have to go back to the entrance if you don't want to. Maybe you want to teleport. Maybe you have that spell involved. Maybe you just don't really feel like doing it every time because it can take a little while. But for the most part, it can make a difference because you can. It will sometimes spawn things and try to put it in your path, just to keep you on your toes. If you backtrack or if you're going to the finished and you're coming back and you think, oh yeah, I've done it. I've got 1 hit point, but I can make it back out again. So that's it. If you have any suggestions or comments, just leave them below. And other than that, thanks for watching the video.